Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Alain. I have my book mug here today with a bunch of books on there, books that I read when I was younger because I've always enjoyed reading, love reading, have gained a lot of enjoyment and education through reading. And I want to share with you today a couple books that I have recently finished that I enjoyed, maybe something that you would find interesting as well. And that's the official Walt Disney quote book, The Term Limits by Vince Flynn, and Words That Work by Dr. Frank Luntz. Those are the three books I'll be discussing today. But before I get into those books, I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank everybody for sharing the podcast and helping people get out there and know about it. And if you're listening, do me a favor. Go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, find the Coffee with Alain podcast and give it a good review and do, help me get some publicity for it if you would. I'd really appreciate that. So thank you. Going to say good morning to Ryan who showed up. Hi, Alan. We used to work at the door to each other. So thank you for being here, Ryan. Appreciate that. And so let's get to the first book today, the official Walt Disney quote book. Now, many of you know I'm a Disney fan. I have a lot of Disney cups. And recently, including last year's trip to Disney World, this upcoming trip to Disneyland this year, and reading a lot of books on Disney because I'm working on a project involving Disney. And so this is all just research and prep. And Ryan says, next door to each other. Okay, we used to work next door to each other. Thanks, Ryan. Where was that, Ryan, that we were next door to each other? I'm trying to remember. But so this book, it just came out. It's the Disney 100 series because this is the 100-year anniversary of when Walt and Roy started the studios that became what we know of today. So it's not the 100th anniversary of the parks or anything. It's 100th anniversary because it was in 1923 that Walt and Roy started the Disney company, what has grown to what we know today as the Disney. And just a really good book of quotes that show the brilliance and the imagination of this man. And here's a quote that I really like. The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. I think all of us could really learn a little bit from that. Sometimes we need to quit talking and get to doing. So this is just a really good book that sort of shows the mind of Walt Disney and, the creativity and the looking forward that he had and the visions that he had and what he thought about life. And so I really enjoyed reading this, and it's furthering my education on Disney for the projects that I'm working on. Ryan says, and that's right, Ryan. We were down there in Montana route applications. That is right. Just, my brain here in the morning focused on Coffee with Alain, wasn't connecting. But yeah, now I'm there now. Yeah, we had those offices pre the pandemic down there. I no longer have an office in Montana. When we moved out because they shut things down with the pandemic, I have remained in my home office. I still work with Reflex Protect and do things with them, but I do it out of the home office. But thank you much for joining and saying hello this morning and reminding me of where we knew each other from. Second book I wanted to talk about. Oh, before I do that, I'm going to look at this quote by Dixon. Dixon says, truly one of America's greatest visionaries. I agree. And that's why I'm such a fan of Disney and Walt Disney. It's because of Walt. And Dixon and I are old enough to remember watching Walt Disney on TV when we were kids. Now, he died a little bit before I was born. Dixon's a little older than me, so Dixon was alive when Walt was alive. But we both can remember stuff when he was on TV there. For me, it was replays. Dixon might have even seen some of the live broadcasts with Walt Disney, but definitely one of the greatest visionaries, and the stuff that he did and started is being continued today by the Disney company. So now we'll get into the second book. Vince Flynn's term limits. You remember I talked about separation of power a little while ago. Separation of power actually comes after this. It was a Mitch Rapp book. This book was one of Vince's first ones. If not his first, it was very early. Does not have Mitch Rapp in it. Some of the characters that are in the Mitch Rapp books are in this book. And so if you're a Mitch Rapp fan and you never went back to read these early ones, you'll recognize characters, but Mitch wasn't in this, but it was still an exciting, great, political thriller. Vince really did because he has passed away and now there's somebody else writing his books, picture of him on the back. But Vince did a great job of writing about the political workings and some of the stuff that goes on between FBI, CIA, president, Congress, Senate, all this workings of Washington, D.C. and the backroom politics and the front room politics and the dirty deals that go on. Vince did a really good job with those, incorporating those throughout his stories. So this was a fun book, just like all the Vince's that I've read are, and I'm actually reading another one right now that I'll talk about in a week or two. Fun action thrillers, a lot of politics and political stuff, as well as the action with the CIA, FBI, Navy SEALs. I mean, he incorporates all, special ops kind of thing. And like I said, this was pre-Mitch Rapp, who's the main character in a lot of the ones going forward after this book. But fun read. Third book today, Words That Work. It's not what you say, it's what people hear, by Dr. Frank Luntz. This is a very interesting and good book if you're involved in communication, which aren't we all involved with communicating at some level? Now, Frank actually worked on political campaigns for decades. And he uses a lot of examples from political arenas as well as business arenas on messages that actually work and get through to people, and why calling something one name rather than something else makes people favor it more, which helps politicians, right? So it's a very fascinating book about how we can change the way the message is presented, focusing on what people hear to get our points across, to better be able to sell ourselves or an agenda, if it's politics, or possibly a corporation or product, if it's a business. And then, you can take some of that even to your own interpersonal communication. While he does focus bigger on those big political or business campaign messages, you can learn from that for even your interpersonal communication to get the message through. Because it's true. It's not just what you say, it's what people hear. And it's how they understand what you said. You might think it's clear this way, and it's not. And that's why I always criticize those memes that go out there. It's not my job to make you understand. I say what I want, and if you don't understand it, that's your fault. No, not really. If they don't understand you, it's your fault. You want to make your messages understood, and you want to get your main point across. You make sure that you do it so other people can understand. Communicate to be understood. That is one of the key principles I teach in my effective communication classes. And so there's a lot of good stuff in this. And it's just really interesting when he goes back to the historic things. And this book was written a few years ago. So even the real current things he talks about, we look back at it from history. And it's fascinating, especially if you're interested in communication or you teach communication like I do, to see how things play out and to see the differences that messages make. And then look at how you communicate with others, and we all try to improve and be better communicators. I want to say a couple things that people commented. Justin says, Walt definitely is and was why I still pay attention, not the current leaders. Exactly. I mean, I don't get involved in the political fights right now. I know Florida, they're suing each other in the I don't care about the political stuff, and I don't really pay much attention to that. I pay attention to Walt, and most of my focus and my study is on Walt for the projects that I'm working on. And then I will admit, I love Mickey Mouse and the Disney characters, especially the older ones, a lot of them that Walt helped. Lady and the Tramp. I mean, God, I've been a Tramp fan since the first time I saw that movie as a little kid in the theater. And I didn't see it when it first came out. I'm not that old, but if you remember way back, for those of us that are old enough, Disney used to re-release those movies in the theaters every 7 years so you could go see them. And so that was pre-DVD, VHS and such. And so I remember seeing those in the theater. And I've always been a fan of Walt. I love Disneyland. I love Disney World and the attention to detail that he insisted on when they made those theme parks. And if you go there, the rides are fun and fantastic. But if you start looking to all the little things and the details that were put in and the things here and there that most people miss, it's just incredible. And that's why I'm such a big fan of Walt too. So you are definitely right. Justin says, excellent book. Dixon says, winner, winner, chicken dinner. And Justin also says, really helped me think about our politicians and government. Try not to do that too much, but this was a thoughtful book. I agree. I mean, Words at Work is such a thoughtful book, and it does get you to think about the politicians and the messages they're putting out and why they're putting out the message that they are. And is it working? Is it not? And so, and we can even see in a lot of the things he talks about now, we'll see that in today's politics. I mean, the principles that he talks about are timeless. Well, he gives, illustrations from the history and from the current political and business environment when he wrote this book a few years ago. The principles and such that are in this are timeless for as long as people are communicating with each other. The stuff in this book is going to be relevant. And again, it's a little harder sometimes to take some of what he writes about and put it into our interpersonal communications. But if you have political aspirations or your business communications, those are some concrete examples of how you can create messages to get through to people for what you're trying to sell, whether that's yourself, your ideas, or possibly even products and such. And so very interesting and fascinating just to see how we work and to see, what makes people tick when they hear this versus hearing that. So very good book on communication. Very good book if you like political and intrigue and fast-paced novels. Vince was fantastic at it. I have not finished reading all of his, and therefore I have not read the newer books that were taken over after Vince died from cancer, way too young, but enjoyable series. And then just a good book to sort of understand Walt and where he was coming from and his thoughts and ideologies, and just helping me know more about him for the projects I'm working on. But it's sort of a motivational, uplifting book too, because he definitely, while he had his demons and his negative things, like all of us, he was very optimistic, forward-looking, visionary, and that comes through with this quote book. And so, a fun, interesting read, especially if you're a Disney fan like I am. So those are the 3 books I wanted to share this weekend. John says, good selection and varied subject matter. Thank you. You are welcome. And most Saturdays, I'm going to try to share, some different books off the shelf or current reads, or even pull an old one off that I really like to give you, an idea of something I may want to incorporate into your reading. I don't expect everybody to read as much as I do. I mean, I put a goal out every year that if I don't read a minimum of 101 books a year, something's very wrong. And if I don't read every day, something is wrong. And so I don't expect people to have to read as much as I do, but I do encourage people to read more. When I look at the national averages of how much people read, it's pretty sad that there are many, many, many individuals that don't even read one book a year. You're missing out because there is so much entertainment and so much education to be found. And if money's an object, I don't buy that, because the library, you can get tons and tons of books for free. All you got to do is fill out a little card. So you don't have to build the library that I have. You can go to the library itself downtown and get books. And they even have programs where they'll mail them to you. If you're in a little town, the little books come through. No excuse not to incorporate some reading. And if you do, you'll find some enjoyment and some education that you won't find anywhere else. Kellen says, woot. Thanks for joining us, Kellen. And I understand there's dyslexia and different things that, make it more difficult for people to read, but that's why we have audiobooks, and I count those as reading too. That if you actually stop and you're listening, I personally, I like the paper to hold it, but when I'm traveling, I got audiobooks plugged in. So get out there, read a book. Hopefully on these Coffee with Alains, I can share something that maybe you didn't know about that you'll incorporate into your reading, and you'll learn something or be entertained just like I am. Everybody, make it a fantastic Saturday, and we will see you tomorrow.